It's not often that I pick up a copy of the LA Times, and I hope it's not often that you do either, because this seems to be the standard of their journalism these days. Mysteriously placed in the business section, we have this article. Mocking anti-vaxxers' COVID deaths is ghoulish, yes, but maybe necessary.
Oh, good God.
So it's necessary to be ghouls now. That's where the left has got to.
Yes, let's justify our own terrible desires and behaviours, eh?
Yeah, it's really the total abolition of standards when you're aspiring to be ghouls. But this isn't even the original headline. The original headline was worse, as we can see here. Why shouldn't we dance on the graves of anti-vaxxers?
Why shouldn't we just be evil?
Ladies and gentlemen, the empathetic left. So let's get it.
This is a big reminder of what I covered yesterday with James O'Brien talking to that guy who was going, well, actually, my auntie died in the Black Lives Matter protest, and he goes, oh, that's appalling, but can you just think of something else? Wow.
I mean, how do you get to this point? Yeah, let's just dance on the graves of anti-vaxxers. Why not? That's fabulous. And we get into the article. It is as bad as it sounds. Let's get into it. Among all the ways that COVID-19 affects our lives, the pandemic confronts us with a profound moral dilemma. How should we react to the deaths of the unvaccinated? Sorry, well, how is this a moral dilemma?
Treat it the same as anyone else's death, you absolute psychopath.
So, you generally, when someone dies, you exhibit a due solemnity, regardless of your opinion of their lives or achievements, because death is a human universal. It's part of the tragedy of life, and something that is to be taken seriously.
And also, once again, it's just another example of this two-tier society people are trying to build. They're talking about the unvaxxed as if they're some kind of separate species. How should we react to the deaths of chimpanzees?
Well,
should we be sad,
it's
or
a
should
lot
we
more
celebrate?
Like, how should we react to the deaths of backsliders, reactionaries, kulaks, or ideological enemies?
Oh, yes.
Or it's like the Nazis saying, how should we react to the deaths of Jews and gypsies?
To be fair, when you bring up the kulaks, there is an interesting parallel to make there. When the Russians sent in their activists into the Ukrainian countryside and basically just got them all to, in a certain sense, genocide the kulaks, there were letters written by those same activists decades later going, why did we let the government propagandize us to such a state where we were just so uncaring and unempathetic towards these people who were just
Well, they
people?
listen to columnists like this by the sound of it.
This
and
is
he
just
continues,
history repeating itself.
On one hand, a hallmark of civilized thought is the sense that every life is precious. But on the other, those who have deliberately flouted sober medical advice by refusing a vaccine known to reduce the risk of serious disease from the virus, including the risk to others, and end up in the hospital or the grave, can be viewed as receiving their just deserts.
My God.
That's even more true of those who not only refused the vaccine for themselves, he says, but publicly advocated that others do so. It has become common online and in social media for vaccine refusers and anti-vaccine advocates to become the target of ridicule after they come down with COVID-19, and especially if they die from it. Witness the subreddit Herman Cain Award, which Lily Loughborough of Slate identified in September as a site for heartless and unrepentant schadenfreude. Yeah, let's witness that subreddit. Let's have a look. There are 462,000 people signed up to this subreddit that's dedicated to mocking the deaths of people who are against public health restrictions.
462,000 evil vampires.
Just take a look at this. And they're just gloating over the deaths of mainly Republicans and Trumpers and people who didn't get vaccinated.
And this really does fly in the face of, but what if you kill grandma? Well, if she was unvaccinated, good.
Yeah.
Is the attitude that these people are taking.
Pretty much.
Double standards are one of my pet peeves, and I think they should be for any reasonable person. So if this doesn't infuriate you, you should probably pay a bit more attention.
Now, this site is called the Herman Cain Award subreddit. So let's see where that name comes from, shall we?
Yes.
So we go back to the article. This site is named for the former Republican candidate for president who became one of the first political notables to succumb to the disease after publicly defying social distancing measures. And he continues. So they're actually mocking the death of a black person in the name of the subreddit, which is interesting. Herman Cain was the co-chairman of Black Voices for Trump until his death in July 2020, aged 74.
Oh, he's part of the Tea Party movement as well. Ooh.
Yeah, no, he's got a fair political background to him. But yes, so he was aged 74. He'd previously beaten stage 4 colon cancer that had metastasized to his liver as well. So it's not exactly a spring chicken. I believe those are called comorbidities in the business.
Yes, I wonder if they would have anything to do with his untimely passing.
But back to the article, they talk about someone else's death. So the issue of how to think about the deaths of the unvaccinated has been thrown into high relief locally by the case of Kelly Earnby, a prominent Orange County Republican and deputy district attorney who advocated against vaccine mandates and died of COVID around New Year's Day, unvaccinated. Earnby's death promptly came to symbolise the rift in the social fabric caused by the ravages of COVID. Some online commenters greeted her demise with glee, provoking her political friends to push back against what Ben Chapman, a Costa Mesa GOP official, called bigotry and hate directed towards her. My colleague Nicholas Goldberg recently lamented eloquently the rift in the social fabric that this species of callous commentary represents. Mocking anti-vaxxers when they get sick has become a bit of a sport, he wrote.
So these people even recognise that the attitudes that are taking are causing massive social rifts between people. This is like the Jacinda Ardern. You're creating a two-tier society. Yes, I am, actually.
Yeah.
With a big...
Suck it up.
With a big horse.
Because I'm on the top tier. Anyway, so if Goldberg's article is what passes for eloquent lamentation in left-wing circles, then they need to hire better writers. Let's have a quick look at it. So the article is titled, "When an anti-vaxxer dies of COVID, is that cause for glib, ironic satisfaction?"
No.
No, it's not.
No.
Like, why are you even in a position where you're having to ask that question?
You absolute maniac. Do you not read back your own titles and headlines and articles and think to myself, have I gone too far here?
Yeah.
Are we the bad guys?
Now, he does have the immensely charitable take that we probably shouldn't be dancing on people's graves. I can respect that.
Really pulling back the severity. Thanks, guys.
But he gets there after going through a long list of reasons why people might enjoy doing so.
Oh, okay.
And he ends with this lament. "I wondered wearily, why do we live in a world where people let their politics make their decisions for them, rather than relying on science or data or experts? How have people become so untethered from reality that they believe in QAnon, or that President Biden stole the 2020 election, his words, or that vaccines are a liberal scam? How have we lost our common shared belief in facts and reality?" Now, from what we've seen of the mainstream media, our common shared belief in facts and reality is in fact everyone believing the narrative the media pushes. The left is not exactly known for its strident defense of objective truth, is it?
Absolutely not.
No, that concept itself is assaulted by the postmodernism-inspired ideological movements on the left which are currently in vogue. The idea of objective truth, if anything, is defended by the right and not the left.
Currently, absolutely yes, but I think, John, you're forgetting that trans women are women.
Of course.
How dare you?
Yes, I apologise for my thought crime. The creation of different camps of beliefs are based on a catastrophic loss of trust in the media, I think it's fair to say. And the media has caused this trust by blatantly lying to its viewers again and again and again and again and again and again. Let's pull up some examples. Weapons of mass destruction in Iraq? Anybody? No? How about the Russian collusion hoax that went on for the entire duration of Trump's presidency and turned out to be completely fabricated? Or the idea that January the 6th should even be mentioned in the same breath as September the 11th and Pearl Harbor, and probably Nagasaki and Hiroshima when it comes to it.
And to tie this into some of our other segments we're going to go into as well, I think people have started to be irked by the incessant nagging of fact-checked posts, which seem to be coming from a very particular ideological bent that does not necessarily seem to be looking at the facts, but more looking at my interpretation of the facts.
That's a very good point. Now, I agree that when two halves of the population believe in different sets of facts, it is a problem. But it's a problem that the mainstream media created. We will never return, probably, to the slavish adherence to mainstream media narratives, and they need to get used to the idea that the power of their voice is broken. As Tolkien said, one cannot be both tyrant and counsellor.
Yes, I do think that this is a consequence and repercussion of the internet age that we do live in. The fact that people are much more easily able to check for themselves and access people who will look into the narrative past what the mainstream media is going into. Because the fact is, for most of the time that print media and the mainstream media has been a thing, we don't know exactly if they've always been as honest as they have presented themselves as, whereas now we have a much greater access to apparatus with which we can check.
Yeah, that's
so that
true.
trust is something that's never going to be
And
recovered.
we can see things with our own eyeballs as well. When a particularly controversial event happens, there are loads of videos and photos all over the internet within 24 hours before anyone has a chance to properly take them down. And so you can actually see what's happening.
And you can see the separation in things like the Rittenhouse narrative, where as soon as that happened, the mainstream media had one very specific narrative they were pushing: neo-Nazi, white supremacist murderer fires into an open crowd of civilians at a Black Lives Matter protest, whereas within 5 minutes of the events
What
happening...
did he do? Did he shoot 2 paedophiles and a wife beater or something like that?
One paedophile and one abuser and one basically Antifa member.
Yeah, but just
who were all trying
just
to
a crowd
attack
of
him.
ordinary civilians. Yeah.
Yes, but those videos were out within 5 minutes.
Yeah,
of the
everyone
event
saw what
happening.
happened. They saw what the media said happened, and they saw, hang on a minute, we're being lied to, openly, blatantly, and dishonestly. Now, going back to the first article, not dancing on the graves of one's enemies is far too charitable for Hiltzik, the author of this piece. I have a slightly different take, he says. To begin with, let's stipulate that not all people unvaccinated against COVID are alike. Some have remained unvaccinated for legitimate medical reasons. Some rare charity here.
Oh, wow.
They may be children for whom the COVID vaccines haven't yet been officially ruled safe. That's not going to age well, is it? Or people with genuine medical reasons for avoiding the vaccine. So he acknowledges they can exist.
Yes, and just to put it out there as well, we are not sticking a stake in the ground one way or the other whether you should take the vaccine or not.
No, we
or
don't
even
give medical advice on
Yeah,
this
we're
channel.
not questioning the efficacy. We're simply saying that it should be your choice.
Yeah, pretty much. It should be your choice what goes into your body, fundamentally.
Yeah, my body, my choice.
Indeed.
You guys came up with that. I mean, come on.
Right. Some may have legitimately faced obstacles in getting to a vaccination site and receiving the full series of shots before becoming exposed to the disease, he continues. Others may have refused the vaccine because they've been deceived by the misinformation and disinformation spread by the anti-vaccine crowd, such as anchors on Fox News. Now, it is true that there is misinformation and disinformation out there about the vaccine, but to say that's entirely the province of anchors at Fox News seems somewhat uncharitable. The deaths of all those victims are truly lamentable. You can tell he's taking a deep breath here, right? Like, all those victims, yeah, that's lamentable. But let me get my dancing shoes on, because we're about to go into the people we don't like.
Where did I leave my clogs?
So here we go. Finally, there are those who have voiced public opposition to his vaccines, not all of whom are unvaccinated themselves. Some have couched their opposition in policy terms. Interesting. Ernby fell into that category. She asserted opposition not to the vaccines as such, but to vaccination mandates.
Don't they understand that means they're an anti-vaxxer nowadays?
That's a very slippery conflation, isn't it? It seems to me that the opposition to a vaccine and the opposition to a mandate are two different things, as we shall get into later. I don't think the government should be involved in mandating what vaccines people are taking, she said during a live-streamed town hall on November the 3rd, 2019, during an unsuccessful campaign for the State Assembly. If the government, so that's pre-COVID, if the government is going to mandate vaccines, what else will they mandate? What else indeed?
And that is the big question.
We have the next 5 to 10 years to find out, guys. Stay tuned. That town hall predated the pandemic. The mandate Ernby opposed then was a law tightening the immunization rules for California school children by eliminating exemptions based on personal belief. Well, I think that's a reasonable stance to hold, to be honest. It should be the decision of the mothers, the parents, the guardians, and not the state as to what your children get vaccinated with, surely. Anyway. But Ernby made clear that her opposition extended to the COVID vaccines. In August, she posted a statement on her Facebook page supporting Huntington Beach firefighters who were opposing a vaccine mandate. The vaccine is not to cure COVID, she said, and mandates won't work. It should be clear that opposing vaccine mandates as a substitute for opposing vaccination itself is a fundamentally incoherent position. It's little more than the garden variety small government Republican ideology. That's what it was in Ernby's hands. Like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Like... This allegation of a fundamentally incoherent position is a fundamentally incoherent statement. Is he really trying to say that opposing vaccine mandates is just a socially acceptable substitute for opposing vaccines? Because that's clearly nonsense. There are moral and ethical problems with government mandation of invasive medical interventions which have nothing to do with the quality or efficacy of the interventions themselves. Right? There's a separate ethical problem we're dealing with here. Then to brand that as garden variety small government Republican ideology is a childish smear. Not for nothing are mainstream journalists called dirty, dirty smear merchants.
True, but I think to myself, small government ideology sounds all right to me,
It
but
does
that's just
indeed.
my personal beliefs.
It does indeed, but actually small government ideology is not necessary as a prerequisite to believe that the
course
government shouldn't be able to mandate medical procedures to be done on you. He then includes a defense of vaccine mandates on the grounds that they increase vaccination rates. Well, nobody's arguing that they don't, right? They are arguing that the use of state coercion in medical interventions is a sinister and dystopian precedent that will create a miserable and unfree world.
Yes, you're arguing in that case that the ends justify the means, which is a very slippery slope.
And in the next graph, he takes great pleasure in pointing out that there is a correlation between Trump vote share and vaccination percentage. I don't find this particularly surprising personally, given that the mainstream propagandizing around this issue has made the choice to get vaccinated into a partisan political issue. But it's worth pointing out that when this was the Trump vaccine, the shoe was on the other foot, and we've collected some tweets here. Let's have a look.
Yes, just a big shout out here to Defiant Els, who are an excellent collector of all of these gaffes that people on Twitter have put out. So we've got a few that we're going to ramp up to a big one, aren't we?
So Andrew Goss, I will never take a Trump vaccine, ever, ever, ever. And then a couple of years later, if you're in the military and you refuse the vaccine, they should kick your ass out. Interesting take. It's gone 360 there. Well, 180.
I mean, this never works out. We've seen with vaccine mandates and other such things with police departments and fire departments that it just leads to about 10% of the forces just quitting.
Just quitting, yeah.
Which is not very good for law and order.
No. If we go to the next one. Oh, who's that? Kamala Harris. Donald Trump still doesn't have a plan to defeat coronavirus, but at Joe Biden and I do. Breaking. The US tops 1 million COVID infections in 24 hours, doubling the figure from just 4 days ago and setting a global record. Again, 2 years is a long time, isn't it? Or a year and a half.
Yes. I will also point out that at the point when she put that out, they were Donald Trump's vaccines, which they were vehemently against at the time. I'm not going to take a Trump vaccine. Do you think I'm a fool? But now they're Biden-Harris vaccines. Ooh, gobble them up.
If we go to the next one. Here from Rex Chapman. It's silly that all Americans don't have healthcare. Sorry, I meant tragic. And nowadays, how about we all agree that hospitals have the right to turn away unvaccinated COVID patients? They have freedom of choice too, right? I'm sure the unvaccinated would have no problem with that, and it would solve a lot of problems. So he's saying that if you don't get vaccinated, you should be denied the right to healthcare.
So I don't think the hospitals and doctors have freedom of choice. I believe that they have to swear a Hippocratic oath of some form.
Yes, to do no harm and to care for patients and things like this. Indeed. And then finally, we have this one. Yes, this is the author of this article, Michael Hiltzik. Column, Trump is plotting a vaccine debacle for November and people will die. Nowadays, mocking anti-vaxxers' deaths is ghoulish but necessary, and we must dance on their graves. It's quite a turnaround for a couple of years, isn't it?
Yeah, it quite is shocking how a few years will do that to you, but also I can't help but feel that perhaps it's just that the initial tweet that he put out was missing, and that's a good thing at the end of it, and perhaps he just forgot that part of the title.
Now, Hiltzik ends his noxious article thus. The policies Ernby advocated may well have contributed to the spread of COVID and to the damaging of the public health infrastructure in her own community. Even before this pandemic, she spoke out for measures that would threaten California's schoolchildren with exposure to deadly childhood diseases. There were no scientific or medical grounds for her opposition to mandates, there was only political ideology. Now, mandates themselves are a representation of a political ideology, the idea that the government has the right to tell you what to put in your body. What happened to my body, my choice, as you said earlier? Even for mandatory children's vaccinations, the ultimate choice rests with the parents or guardians and not with the state. So he's trying to say that this is science and medicine on one hand versus political ideology on the other. It's not. It's political ideology versus moral and ethical concerns.
Yes, and their idea of science and medicine versus political ideology, what the left has done, and what many people have done, it's a partisan problem, bipartisan problem, I should say, is they have combined the two and turned it into what many online are referring to as scientism, where science itself is being deified as some kind of holy law that cannot be questioned, when the whole point of science is that you question it. and try and refute it and falsify it so that you can test it and see if it holds up.
He finishes with, "It may be not a little ghoulish to celebrate or exult in the deaths of vaccine opponents, and it may be proper to express sympathy and solicitude to those they leave behind. But mockery is not necessarily the wrong reaction to those who publicly mocked anti-COVID measures and encouraged others to follow suit before they perished of the disease and the dangers of which they belittled. Nor is it wrong to deny them our sympathy and solicitude," you don't seem to have a great reservoir of either, "or to make sure it's known when their deaths are marked that they had stood fast against measures that might have protected themselves and others from the fate they succumbed to." Ladies and gentlemen, again, the famous empathy of the left, otherwise known as smug, sneering condescension, and a barely restrained glee in dancing on the graves of people who disagree with them. If you want to see more from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to enjoy all of the premium content we have on the site, such as this premium article by me, exploring how inclusivity is in fact the most exclusionary belief system of all time. If you prefer to listen to our articles rather than read, we have an audio track recorded by our external reader, John Crow, available to Silver Tier members. You can get access to all of our premium content with a Bronze Tier membership for just £5 a month. If you'd like to stay up to date with all the content we're putting out on the site, you can follow Lotus Eaters on Getter as well at getter.com. You can also follow our individual writers and presenters, such as Harry here. Thank you, and goodbye.